Kia ora koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. Right, I'll just give a little bit of an overview of the session today. So I'm going to give a bit of an update on our key markets and some of the activities DINZ has been undertaking. That'll then be followed by updates from each of the venison marketing companies, and then it'll be followed by a Q&A afterwards. So, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions for that in advance as well. I reached out as part of this. I wanted to get some really good insights from the market. So I reached out to some of the key customers to get their view on the year that had been and their outlook moving forward. And so we received videos from Mark Mitchell from Broadleaf in the US, who works with Duncan NZ, Alexander Eichler, who's based in Germany and works with Alliance, and from Jan Kunz of Leuten Foods in the Netherlands, who works with Silver Fern Farms. So look, they were all really generous with their time and have provided us some really great insights and information, some of which I will be sharing today. But they all gave us really long videos, and unfortunately we don't have enough time to show that all today. But we will be sending sort of the full videos around when we send out the conference updates and including them on the website. And I would really encourage you to take the time to go and have a listen to what they have to say about their experience over the last 12 months and how they're looking at the recovery. So a little bit of scene setting and possibly the most obvious statement of the day, but COVID-19 is still having significant impacts. And the two sort of main areas that we are seeing that through is through the food service sector restrictions. And I will go into quite a bit more detail on that in our key markets. The other one that I just want to touch on, and I know some of the other speakers today will also be talking about this, is the significant disruption that we are seeing to global freight. So limited container numbers, port closures, lack of crew, inability to go to port and change crews. They're all issues that we are seeing at the moment and are going to have an ongoing impact over the next few months. And indeed, in our first video, Mark Mitchell, who we did hear from yesterday, is talking a little bit about their recovery over the next year, but particularly highlighting some of those difficulties with freight.
Pathway towards recovery. 2021 is off to a positive beginning. We're witnessing an increased interest in higher quality, especially meats. The recovery will not be a sprint. It will be a marathon. But every race has a beginning, and we believe we're out of the gate. The congestion in the maritime shipping is concerning, and vessels are bunching up in the ports and developing arrival delays of up to 3 weeks. Cost control will be paramount. Shortage of the labour force, packaging materials, cartage operators, and fuel are driving inflationary costs. The marketplace has changed, and everyone, from the pundits to the meat jockeys, appear to have their own perspective on that matter. To that end, we are working diligently with our customers to understand their changes and to react quickly to capitalise on any outstanding opportunities.
And I think what Mark said there is that the recovery is underway in the US, and we're certainly seeing that happen. So around 37% of the US population are now fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and about another 10% have had their first dose of the vaccine. And we're starting to see, I'm starting to see things like this popping up online. So this was Rachel Smith who said, fitting as hell on my fully cooked vax night, when I set out for an impromptu celebratory dinner, I wandered for an hour trying to find a table for two, and every local place was full to bursting. And so I think that's a great sign of the beginning of that recovery for restaurants. Now, you have to remember here that they are operating still under social distancing rules and things like that, but it is positive. And like we saw here, when we came out of lockdown, people wanted to go to restaurants, they wanted to eat out with their friends and family, and they were spending more than they had before. So it's a good sign. And so looking at those restrictions that we're currently seeing on the food service sector, this is a very different graph to the one I showed last year at the conference. And so 16 states currently have no restrictions on food service dining, which is great, while 34 states still have some restrictions. However, we are seeing those restrictions ease quite rapidly. Indeed, yesterday the CDC announced that there's no mandated mask wearing for those that are fully vaccinated. And indeed, in some states, if patrons can show that they've had a recent negative COVID test or that they are fully vaccinated, that enables the restaurant to actually increase the total capacity of patrons they can have in their space. The yellow is ones that still have restrictions. Yeah. So, and what's the other significant thing about having that vaccinated population is that it's going to help bring back another key industry for us, and that's tourism, because of course tourism and food service go hand in hand. But again, that recovery is not going to happen overnight either. So, the state of New York, for example, is predicting that their domestic tourism level is not going to reach 2019 or pre-COVID levels until 2023. Now, I've used this data in a few of presentations. So this is restaurant patronage data from the Open Table. It's a reservation website for the US and some other countries around the world. So it's not whole of industry data, but just a subset, those that use that platform. And what we can see here, though, is that over the last 5 months, there has been a steady increase in people going back to restaurants in the US. So as of last week, they're sitting around 20% down on 2019 levels. So yeah, that again is a really good signal that those restaurants are opening up and people are going. And indeed, if we look at some whole of food service industry predictions, so this is out of a US-based food service research company, they're predicting that the industry will recover to somewhere between 85 and 90% of pre-COVID 2019 levels by the end of this year. So again, a positive sign. So just looking quickly at the export statistics. So this is the chilled venison exports for the last wee while up to the US. And as has been mentioned yesterday as well, the chilled exports are heavily reliant on that food service sector. And so they are still significantly down on pre-COVID levels. And that recovery is going to be tied to those restaurants opening up. And if we look at the frozen exports, it is a little bit of a different story. And I guess there's a couple of factors in here. So many of the manufacturing and the retail items that have seen increased consumer demand by more people eating at home, that's gone up. And so we have seen an increase in volume of frozen venison exports. Unfortunately, it's partly also driven by the low returns or the price that is helping to drive those volume sales. And which, if I'm to pick up a few positive signals about, it is keeping venison in the market and also in consumer mouths. And certainly the companies will talk more about their activities up there as well, but there is more venison going in at a retail level than before. And so that's a really great thing. And so, yeah, on that note, so as Ian mentioned yesterday, DINZ and the venison marketing companies really refocused our P2P activities onto North American retail. And this is going to remain our focus for next year as well. Until the end of the program. And so before COVID, we had very little product that was going into retail. It was, as you know, very food service focused. So collectively, the goal for the program for this year, which is year end September, was to increase that to 500 tonnes, which we're well on the way to achieving. So the companies are working with a variety of partners and geographically across the entire US. And I think it's fair to say that everyone is investing to really make this a long-term and sustainable market for the industry. So look, they're going to talk about in a bit more detail about their activities. And we're also going to, those that aren't able to talk about it today, we're going to be providing some in-depth articles in DINZ News over the next coming issues about the activities that we're doing. So make sure you keep an eye out in there as well. So one of the projects that we've done recently to support that retail work is some social listening work. So social listening sees us collecting data from a variety of social media channels, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, for example. And then this data gets analysed to gain insights, and we're able to it's connecting exactly with what the consumer is saying through their online channels. So this is one of the examples of the sort of insights that we get. So we can see across the US where the geographic spread of those conversations about venison is actually happening. And I guess we probably weren't particularly surprised at this. So we know the West Coast and the East Coast and then in through the Rockies are key venison markets. So that really reinforced that the companies are working in the right areas. One of the other great things about that research is that we're actually able to gain an understanding of the sentiment of those conversations. So we can analyse certain keywords around those conversations to see, are they positive conversations or negative or neutral? And so the graph here, we've got green are the positive conversations and grey are neutral, and red are more negative ones. And so I guess it's good for us to see that the majority of those conversations are positive or on the neutral spectrum as well. So it gives us a sense of sort of what the mood is for the product. And this last one here shows the types of cuts that these conversations are about. So it's very colourful. There's a lot of different cuts being talked about. But the main ones we are seeing conversations about are burgers and mince and steaks. And again, that makes a lot of sense because those are the consumer-friendly cuts, and they are the ones that we have been seeing an increase in those sorts of products appearing in retail level. Okay, shifting focus to Europe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about their vaccine rollout, and because that is going to have a direct impact on the opening of food service. So this graph here shows the number of doses of vaccine that have been distributed as of last week by a number of countries in Europe. So the UK is that top bar that's quite far ahead of everyone else. But the second one there is Germany. So they've had about 35 million doses of the vaccine given out. But when we dig a little bit deeper and start looking at that as percentages of their population, a lot of these, the key markets we're working in, that's only around 10% of their population to date have actually had are fully vaccinated. So for Germany, it's around 8 million people. So this is one of the things that we're going to be looking at really closely over the coming months to see how the rest of the year is going to pan out. And I guess the positive thing is that while only 8 million are fully vaccinated, an additional 30 million people have actually already had the first dose of their vaccine. So we hope to see these numbers climbing rapidly over the next weeks and months. And if I look at the kind of knowing that background, and as some of you are aware, Europe has been in lockdown effectively for the whole year. If we look at the restaurant patronage data, it is a very different story compared to the US. So there is a line down the bottom at -100, and that's basically, this is for Germany, sorry, because the restaurants have been locked down. There's no business there. We are hoping to see the same rapid rise. So the dotted line is 2020 patronage data. And so restaurant restrictions are easing as of this week in Europe. So outdoor dining is beginning again. And then for most of the countries, we're talking about mid to late June that they're opening indoor dining as well. So yeah, I would anticipate that will climb fairly rapidly. What I guess we're hoping not to see this year is the decline again that they had when it got to September, October, and that's when they had their winter outbreak starting over there. And I guess that's back to my point about the vaccines. That's why we want to see those vaccines increases to help avoid that. So the challenge for Europe is going to be that they are heading into their summer holidays in June, July. People are sick of being locked up. They want to travel. Their governments want them to travel to get the tourist spend happening. But with so few people fully vaccinated, this does create a risk around more virus spread. So if we take a quick look at the export statistics here, so again, it's quite a different story to the US. So this was the European chilled market exports. And as you can see, actually the chilled exports for last game season went reasonably well. This is really due to the fact that a lot of those customers over there had pivoted to retail, and with venison being popular over there, it was easier for them to be able to sell that product through their retail channels as well. But again, with frozen venison, it's the similar sort of story to the US. So we do have high volumes, but again, it's that the price is helping to drive some of those volume purchases. And that's particularly into some of those manufactured products and items. And often those companies are very price sensitive, and so when they see an opportunity to purchase at a price that meets their particular price point, they will take that. The other thing, so there has already been some increased exports as well this year, and we're anticipating that you'll be seeing during the game season more sales of venison through some of the bulk retailers, so like the Aldi or the Lidl over there as well, which again they're very price sensitive as customers, but when they do purchase, they can move large volumes of product. So I've just got a wee clip here from Jan Kunz from Leuten Foods, who was just talking about what he sees happening for venison over the next year.
First of all, it's hope, so it still has to happen. And with the summer coming and people going out and people are sick and tired of Corona, it is a danger that we get, Corona is always there, and vaccinations going very slow in Europe. So it's hope, yes, and I hope really for a good end of the year season. But yeah, we don't wait for the vaccinations, so we continue present innovation on venison to retailers like Albert Heijn, like Lidl, like others, and also the online business. And for every consumer, we have a product now. We have a venison burger, which is a high quality burger. It's not too expensive. So we have the venison roast for the family, and we have the high-end venison steak from chilled forcuts. So marinated or not marinated, whatever the customer wants.
So I think Jan there is sort of echoing the same issues that I raised earlier as well. But what I think is really great is to hear about the innovation in the different products and developing different products at a variety of price points for different customers. And that's echoed in this clip from Alexander Eichler, who was talking about how they've had to change some of their promotional activities and the way they connect with their customers over the last year.
New Zealand farmed actually venison is, I like to say it's for the connoisseur, the people that know. They want to try something different, and not on a day-to-day basis. They want to try something different. First of all, they need to understand how to use it, how to consume it, how to prepare it. And this we're trying to bring forward with our promotions in the supermarkets at retail level. Videos, give them a list what to buy, show them how easy it is to prepare. You have a safe product, take it home safe in a cooling bag.
And that leads really nicely into me talking about how DINZ has continued to support those customers up in the marketplace, because most of the activities that we've done have shifted online now. So a lot of the work, our chef Shannon Campbell been doing a fantastic job developing recipes and photos and videos for customers to use in their own social media channels, which have really become their primary way of connecting with consumers. And so some of them didn't have those channels before COVID and have just started developing them now. Likewise, we want to continue to support them to have that connection with the chefs for when food service does reopen. But again, that's all gone online as well. So this photo here is Shannon filming a butchery demo for one of the companies to use with their online demonstrations or online program that they have for their chefs. And actually this week, Shannon is doing a live streaming demo to an online trade show. So all of the major trade shows are still closed and have moved online, utilising more streaming and things like that. We just wanted to keep that connection with chefs as well, so that when they do open, when they're thinking about their menus, that New Zealand venison is still top of mind. And so Shannon worked with the embassy in Berlin to put together some chef tasting packs that some of the other New Zealand exporters contributed some products and bits and pieces to, and we sent that out. And the other neat thing about that is it generated a lot of social media content for the companies and everyone to share and use as well. So one of the other programs that we've done for a long time is our work with the culinary schools to be introducing the chefs of tomorrow to New Zealand venison. And so we've continued to do that, but in a very different format. So we put boxes of ingredients together for the students, and then they join online for a 2-hour cook along with Shannon. And but the kind of the neat thing about that now is that they're all then using their own social media channels and tagging our customers and everyone to show them the dishes and the bits and pieces that they're creating as well. So I think that's really great. It was mentioned yesterday that in terms of our Savannah program, so we have shifted the focus of that to North America, but we still are continuing to support those in the market that are progressing with it. So Alliance's partner Bimpex in Belgium, they are still keen to do it, and of course have pivoted that towards retail for the upcoming summer season. So Shannon worked with them to develop some sauces and some spices as giveaways for consumers, and so we look forward to hearing that's again a bit of a new activity for us, or a promotion for us. So we're interested to hear how that goes over the coming months. Looking now over to China, so we've really continued to develop, I guess, what I'm sort of calling our foundational activities up in that market for the industry. So this last year saw us launch our Chinese website, which looks really great, and it's obviously a good resource for chefs and things. And also our WeChat platform. So WeChat again is a primary business tool up in China. And for us, it's not about doing a reach out into consumers, but this is about providing a platform where we can support those selling New Zealand venison by having resources available to them to flick out to their customers. So, and as Inish mentioned yesterday, 2020 saw DINZ make funds available from its reserve for our contestable venison marketing, contestable fund that the venison marketing companies could apply to. And that was to really get them to be undertaking transformational activities with benefits for both their own business units, but also for the wider venison industry. And so the independent panel reviewed all the applications, and Silver Fern Farms China project was chosen as the winner of that. Now, I know Peter Robinson is going to give a little bit of an update on how that project is going, so I'll leave that for him to talk about. So the main work we've been doing in China this year is continuing to work with Chinese chefs to really understand how venison can work in Chinese cuisine. It doesn't have a lot of tradition of being used in Chinese cooking, and therefore chefs they don't know and particularly understand it. And so we've really been working to engage with some chefs to just get them to experiment with the products, with a wide variety of cuts, and to see what works. So we actually we gave a small group of chefs some homework over their New Year's holiday period in February, and we asked them to go away and create recipes, and then to really analyse each dish, thinking about it from the context of their own restaurant. What would they charge for it? Does this, if they're using a traditional Chinese recipe, does the inclusion of venison elevate that dish in some way? And we then have follow-up interviews with the chefs, and we also film and do photographs. So we're creating some great content for the companies to use along the way. But the real the kind of key information that we're looking for and that we're starting to get back is things around like why they particularly like a cut over others. Is it the texture? Is it the taste? One of the things that I think we're going to explore a little bit further is around the specifications of the cuts. So a lot of the cuts that are going up are still being cut to European or US specifications that chefs like up there. But we're finding some of the Chinese chefs are suggesting that might be a bit limiting for what they want to do with the product. And so we'll be able to investigate that a bit further to see if there's perhaps some changes that could be made there that would help to get it more ingrained with Chinese chefs. And so look, this is a piece of work that will continue. It's not it is a longer term project again for us to be working at and investigating. But I look forward to sort of sharing those insights that we keep gaining as we go along. So I'm just going to leave you with two final videos from our customers in Europe. I asked Jan Kunz if he had any messages for our farmers, and coincidentally, Alexander Eichler raised a similar topic in his response, and it's around sustainability and how their consumers are viewing it and what's important to them. So, and I know obviously it's a hot topic for us here, and I think it's important for you to hear from those customers about what they're hearing from consumers in their markets.
Keep up the good work and never give up, and search for more sustainability on your farm. We need to get more into sustainability, animal welfare. I know New Zealand is far away, but the consumer is demanding us to have a story what is really true. And that water, energy, how you treat animals, it's a very, very important USP for the near future, especially for retailers, where the retailer will take market share for sure. So please keep on investing, keep on communicating with each other how to do better in this. Thank you.
Young consumers care. They want to know where the product comes from. They want information. They want not only to know it comes from New Zealand. They want to know. They want answers to question: how old are the animals? How are they being treated? What is their diet? They want to know. They want to have answers to sustainability. They want to make sure that the complete animal is being consumed, used up.
It would be fair to say that venison has had a challenging 24 months, beginning with the price correction in early 2019 and culminating in the pandemic fallout. But as you can see from the chart, lamb and beef have rebounded due to less exposure to the food service sector. Venison got savaged by COVID lockdown. So understandably, there is a longer lag phase in the correction. Our task is to get venison on a similar upward trajectory. In our view, North America and China will lead the recovery. Nothing much positive has come out of the pandemic except for the surge in global retail spending. This growth has created a new phenomenon labelled by the experts as meal fatigue. This simply means people are sick of the same old staple proteins of beef, chicken, and pork, and are experimenting with alternative options. This is something we need to capitalise on. And though this situation is occurring in most regions, the market with the greatest near-term potential is the USA. America is a protein-consuming juggernaut. They have an annual consumption of a staggering 75.3 million tonnes of fresh and processed meat. That's 40% more than China, with a quarter of the population. However, with this scale, there are positives and negatives. The positive is you only need to command a fraction of the market share to make a meaningful impact. The negative is trying to force your way into retail shelf space with a non-mainstream protein. This requires perseverance and patience and is a high-contact sport, needing careful management and top-line execution. Success will require strong working relationships amongst all the key players and a well-thought-out strategy of who the target market is. We know from previous research that consumer trends are in premium red meat. Knowing how our food is produced and the implications for our health and the health of the planet is more important than ever before. Better for you, better for the animal, better for the planet, better for the communities. As global awareness and preference for New Zealand grass-fed red meat grows, so too does our ability to reposition venison from a commodity into a scalable consumer brand capable of realising a price premium. Our target consumers have a need for health-conscious, functional foods and food sourced ethically and sustainably. By segmenting our consumers, we now have better understand what drives their behaviours and decisions. With this knowledge, we can shape our actions in priority markets. Marketing that connects our methods of farming with the social elements of the cooking and eating experience will catch the attention of our target segment. The USA is a difficult market to serve, but we have the considerable advantage of having the lamb company resources at our disposal. They cover production, distribution, sales, and customer support, with facilities in LA, New Jersey, and Toronto. This is the type of muscle needed when launching into retail with a minority protein. The next part of the puzzle is getting the appropriate product forms to retail that will provide the greatest chance of commercial success. This is where ground, or as we call it, mince, ticks all the boxes. Ground venison has the potential to secure shelf space and provide a convenient way to introduce customers to the product. Consumers must have a good experience with their initial trial of venison to become return customers. Ground products will provide that opportunity, as it represents a flexible ingredient with a very low risk of failure. The ground option is also commercially important to venison, as around 45 to 55% of total output in our industry is either A, B, or C grade trim or boneless shank or neck. This product forms a base for the ground and allows us to move further up the value chain with minimum investment. These manufacturing items have traditionally been exposed to commodity fluctuations, and this is a weakness we need to plug. We must also be targeted in the product range offered. It is a case of less is more. Ground retail 500 gram packs, one steak item, and blended gourmet burgers are the options most likely to succeed. There will also be the thick end of $1 million invested on marketing and promotion in the States this year, jointly funded by DINZ, Venison Marketing Companies, and MPI by the way of the Passion to Profit initiative. This is a significant sum, but must be well targeted to achieve the best possible outcomes in a market of this scale. The first rollout of the loin steak commenced on April the 16th in 80 dual stores, with ground product to follow. Initial reports are encouraging, and the team will look to add further key customers over the coming weeks. We know a minority protein can be successful when you look at bison. This is now a 10,500 tonne, $300 million a year business. Tough old buffalo that needs to be finished on grain to make it palatable. Our premium quality venison will be more than a match for bison. Retail support requires constant supply 365 days of the year. Commitment to supply raw material at an agreed price over an agreed period. If shelf space is secured, it needs to be treasured. A supply gap in this game is terminal. Commercial success is dependent on educated and receptive consumers, excellent market partners, and ongoing consumer demand. The USA is and will remain an important market in the venison space, but there are also other activities underway to drive value improvement. We have some interesting projects on the go with our UK team featuring Pure South branded venison. There is a November launch of League Steaks with the online retailer Ocado, who are partnered with Marks & Spencer in a 50-50 JV. We have 2 new venison items listed with HelloFresh UK under the Green Chef category. There's also a new listing with HelloFresh Europe, with 2 further products to follow. So a lot is happening or about to happen in the home delivery sector. Carnival cruise lines are back as well, but on a much reduced scale, which will only improve as travel confidence returns. There are also ongoing key account programs across Europe, which will scale up as COVID restrictions decrease and out-of-home dining picks up. There's also the non-meat category, which can deliver significant value. Alliance Group have a JV with Meteor to extract additional value from the bones and offals. Work continues in the field of co-products with supply to the traditional Chinese medicine and functional food sectors. We are also forming partnerships with the rendered meal for pet end-user applications. And finally, the NPD team is looking to extract products, particularly from blood, to supply both the pharmaceutical and nutraceutical channels. I think you'll all agree, and I've had it said to me several times over the years, that everyone prefers stability, both in livestock schedules and market prices. These boom and bust cycles are detrimental to both market development and on-farm investment. As part of this reset, we need a more mature approach around both livestock and market prices. Using forward contracts to ensure retail and food service supply agreements that gives a level of surety on returns for both suppliers and customers are required. Alliance Group remains fully committed to the venison category, and we are determined to build a business that creates sustainable performance and growth. Thank you.
A year ago today, as a nation, we'd made it out into Alert Level 2. Processing and marketing in Levels 3 and 4 was certainly no round of beer and Skittles, but as an industry, we made it here today. We have a few challenges ahead of us, but we also have quite a few opportunities. As a quick recap of who we are, Duncan New Zealand's been in business for 30 years. Our mission is to create a sustainable future for New Zealand venison. We have a plant in Mosgiel and a plant in Rotorua, and we export to the EU, Asia, Australasia, and North America. We've got 2 livestock reps, one in each island, and we offer 12-month contracts. You will have noted in your car, the rear vision mirrors are far smaller than the windscreen, for good reason. Going forward is the key. But before we look to the future, we just need to take a glance back now for a little bit of important context. In 2018, things were cranking along pretty well for this industry with multiple positive drivers. Then in 2019, 2 issues emerged. The pet food inventory held by the manufacturers in the US became of concern to them, and once they realised, their correction was swift, resulting in a sudden drop in bones pricing. Then as 2019 progressed, the frozen venison price in the EU became too far extended from the local sourced frozen price. A slowdown, like Terry said, was in play. Because of this, in early 2020, plant throughput reductions had already begun. Then in mid-March, as you know, COVID swept into play and required further throughput reductions for social distancing to keep our processing teams safe and healthy. The industry banded together to find innovative ways to process, but ultimately all that product went to frozen storage. At the same point, white tablecloth dining in the EU and US was put into hibernation, and with it, the collapse of export sales. The impact was huge. We saw a savage 85% reduction in sales overnight. But we're still here. Why? Our dedicated small team stepped it up a gear. We got innovative, and we kept in touch with the strong relationships and customers we developed over the last 30 years, and they deepened. Prior to COVID, as you know, the strength of the dairy industry was a focus on the HRI sector. Duncan New Zealand was no different. We realised, though, that this was no longer the best future-proof strategy. We've looked at the new normal, and we've looked at our specialist capabilities, and we expect to see some real benefits going forward from a three-pronged strategy: retail-ready products, e-commerce, and HRI. So then, today, where are we at? US sales are slowly recovering. EU sales are also ticking along. But both markets are nervous. As immunisation programs spread, some more confidence grows, socialising increases, pent-up bank accounts and energy are looking for some outlets. Some restaurants will not make it, but most will. Retail options will continue to emerge, and behaviours learnt in lockdown, such as online ordering, will in most cases, we believe, stay. The current restart prices in the market are proving necessary to move the product which was stored frozen through the period. Add to this, we have what is currently agreed to be the worst shipping situation in the history of the industry. This is a photo of not every container ship in the world lunchtime last Thursday. If you look at where Long Beach would be off LA there and zoomed in, at lunchtime Thursday, there was 25 ships just sitting off the shore. So it's actually worse than this. On top of that, the lack of passenger plane flights means that air freight rates are huge, and this further eats into already small margins. But the positive from all of this is that these issues are fixable in time. Our product is still world leading, and going forward, likely in more demand as people value its superior nutrition profile more than they have to date. Social gathering and dining will reconvene in time, and more comfort with cooking venison at home will develop. Now we just have to get the product to the consumer and reignite their passion for it. Therefore, we strongly recommend not making long-term decisions based on today's messy supply chain and market signals. A medium to long-term view here is now needed. There's no question that this global pandemic has impacted every person on earth in some way. As marketers, in order to build the best experience, we need to understand our customers, especially how they've changed over the last year and what they're thinking about going forward. Here's some quick stats which illustrate the change this pandemic has had on consumer buying behaviour. 70% of consumers say COVID-19 has made them more focused on managing their mental health and their well-being. 49% of consumers shop online more now than they did pre-COVID. And the average US monthly grocery bill has increased by 30% since March 2019. So what have we learned so far? We know that consumers are spending more money online. This was a growing trend pre-pandemic, and COVID has only sped this up. Online retail stores and meal kit platforms are hugely popular, and we are now selling venison direct to the end consumer, which means we can understand their habits and their preferences. enabling us to create the ideal experience for them. We're creating a compelling content to promote venison as a trendy superfood, alongside its sterling reputation as a premium restaurant dish. This message is reinforced with educational branding and specific instructions at the point of sale. And we work closely with our online retail partners and export customers to ensure they are well equipped with the content to market New Zealand venison effectively in this modern marketplace. The global pivot towards e-commerce means the online marketplace is growing increasingly competitive. When strolling the aisles, we are faced with countless protein options, including plant-based and lab-grown alternatives. So how do we make New Zealand venison stand out from the crowd? Research on consumer decision-making shows that emotion trumps logic 9 times out of 10. This means we have to promote New Zealand venison strategically to strike an emotional chord with our consumers. By promoting the health benefits and added value of venison, we are attracting health-conscious consumers of all ages, securing venison demand from consumers spread over multiple generations. I'll leave you here with a short promotional video we launched earlier this year with a professional multi-sport athlete, 2-time coast-to-coast champion, husband and father of 2 kids, Dougal Allen. He demonstrates how New Zealand venison is a delicious protein source to be enjoyed by health-conscious consumers of all ages, from restaurant tables to backyard barbecues.
I think initially I was drawn to multisport through just a genuine sort of desire to get outside and explore. And then it sort of evolved, I guess, into more of a competitive context for me. I like to test myself against others, but also against the environment. The biggest driver for me is improvement. I still feel I can be a better athlete every day. So I've got some events I'm especially keen to do a better job in that I've ever done before. And I think that's realistic, and it's what gets me out of bed every morning. Well, the biggest breakthrough for me has been protein. Carbohydrates are easy to manage, but the performance and health benefits that come from clean and complete protein sources like venison have been massive. The key to healthy eating these days is keeping it clean and as unprocessed as possible. And what stands out to me about Duncan venison is that it is a naturally raised single source protein option that tastes delicious. Venison is one of those, I guess, superfoods that as a family we include often in our diet. And for Amy and I, it's really important that we know we're giving our kids the best chance to develop, their body and their brain. So venison is definitely part of the weekly menu, and the kids love it, which is really important. And Amy and I do too. So as a family, it's a no-brainer. It's inspiring to build my career and raise my family in the same mountains as Duncan venison, and to know that they are providing me and many other families the opportunity to fuel an active and healthy lifestyle.
Hi everyone, my name's Matt. I'm relatively new to the industry, so as a bit of a side note, thank you to everybody that I've met here and previous to this. It's certainly humbling to come back home. I've been overseas for a long time into the farming community, but the deer industry itself has proven to be a very close-knit community, which has been very enjoyable for me. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, spent quite a bit of time in North America, so I want to talk about some insights into venison itself in North America, and secondly, I want to give an example of some positive things that, a positive program we've got going that's been given a real kick in the guts over COVID, which I think will be an interesting thing for everybody in the room. And to contest the most random slide ever shown at a deer conference, I'll start with this one. Previous to this, I spent 15 years in the hunting industry, which interestingly enough started in New Zealand, which has got very close ties to the New Zealand deer industry in the estate hunting side of things. And I moved overseas and worked as a guide and a cameraman, and then eventually in recruitment into the hunting industry, where I spent a lot of time filming hunting and conservation-based films around the world. Now, it's an interesting thing. I lived and worked with American clients, so I spent a lot of time around Americans, but lived in big urban centres traditionally in the US. So I always used to get sat next to the vegan or the vegetarian. And when I first went to North America, I spent a lot of time defending this kind of thing and the fact that it is conservation based. But they would line me up from the other side of the room and say, "You're the hunter, aren't you?" And that conversation was always a challenging one. But within North America, I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the perception of venison itself. In New Zealand, when we say venison, we have a very, a UK-based perception of venison. It covers deer or deer meat, more specifically red deer. In America, that's quite different. If you've been to Africa, venison tends to cover anything that you harvest off plains, so all plains game is venison. And in America, venison, in my experience, means that guy on the top there, that's a North American whitetail in the middle of the rut. And due to the way that their game and hunting system is set up, they have a narrow window on when they can harvest these animals, which is right in the middle of the raw or the rut, and it's generally in the middle of winter. So we all know in this room that as far as an eating quality experience goes, that's not your best option, but they are restricted to do that within that season. So what that leads to is an interesting scenario when it comes to the perception of venison. When somebody says venison, what does that mean? So venison traditionally in the US has existed in the exotic game fridge. So I worked in a butchery in Vancouver. We had venison. It sat next to the alligator and the ostrich in a freezer in the back of the butcher shop. Didn't get a lot of exposure. The second one there is Uncle Randy's freezer, and that's Uncle Randy shot that whitetail in the fall. Not a big fan of venison, put it in the bottom of his freezer, let it get freezing burnt, dug it out 3 years later and gave it to their nephew, and that wasn't a great experience for them. And then the third option there is a white tablecloth being served a beautiful venison cut in a restaurant, which is a completely polar opposite to what they're used to. So it creates this sort of contention around what venison is and what they are expecting. So what we've seen and what I've seen in North America since I've been there is I still get lined up by the vegans and vegetarians, but the change has been they come across the room and say, "You're the hunter, tell me more about that." And this is largely been driven by a shift of hunting in popular culture in North America. And it's been driven largely by the guy on the top there, Joe Rogan, who was 10 years ago a non-hunter movie star, TV show star in California, who asked good questions and got onto the fact that hunting was actually a really good way to have a bit of responsibility about how you get your meat, but it was also a way to get delicious, nutritious elk. He talks a lot about elk and venison and how great it is. And that precipitated a lot of changes. You'll see Netflix now has an accessible hunting-based program called Meat Eater, driven by a guy called Steve Rinella, who, interestingly enough, got his shot at fame through being a guest on the Joe Rogan podcast. But just to give you some context, I mean, Joe Rogan's podcast at the moment is downloaded around 190 million times a month. That's greater coverage than all of the North American news networks. His reach is huge. And what he's done is he's dragged a group of non-hunters in urban centres around North America on a journey from that to asking questions about hunting. And he talks about venison and elk to a point of nauseum on his show. So what that's mean is and he talks about taste and he talks about the health benefits, all the right things. But the reality is, 190 million downloads, admittedly they're not all in the US, but what that means is there's a lot of people there who are primed for venison. They want venison, but they can't get it. They all fancy themselves as hunters, but the reality is they are urbanised. They are, although they might like the idea of hunting, it's not as easy as you might think it is. And quite simply, there's not enough animals on the mountain for them all to go out and harvest an elk or a deer to put in their freezer. So the situation that we're in is we have a venison primed but venison starved audience in North America. And it's a relatively new change, which I find very exciting. So these guys and girls are looking for ways to prepare venison in a more, let's call it, traditional fashion. Americans love smoking things. They love barbecues. So it's about taking the opportunity post-COVID, and we've heard everybody talk about all the problems that we are facing as an industry, and we are no different to anyone else. But I can see some really positive outlook, particularly in the US, around presenting venison in a way that Americans can consume, and it's familiar to them. Second thing I want to talk about is a bit of a success story at First Light. Many of you will know that we also in the grass-fed Wagyu business, and we set up a system in the US, or a program in the US called the US Steak Club. Now, what that is it is a food subscription service, but more specifically, it's not a subscription, it's a club. So it was targeted at high net worth individuals, originally on the west coast of the US. They have to join a waiting list. They have to pay a year's subscription up front. They have to pay for a kit to ensure that they can cook the meat correctly. And what that does is give us the ability, A, to access customers directly, but B, also to make sure that their eating experience is a positive one. Now, we all know that a nicely marbled piece of Wagyu is a little bit more forgiving than a piece of venison. But what it does is it's created an engaged audience where we can tell people how to cook. So the Steak Club itself is designed around the fact that they've got their own app. So they can go on there. They don't know what they're getting until it arrives at their front door. So they get a monthly delivery of meat. And on that app, we provide them with exact cooking instructions. We provide them with various recipes, but also there's a huge social element to it. People interacting and talking about and commenting about the meat. So it's a very interesting platform, and the fact that they pay good money. I mean, the mid-range one's around 150 US, and they get on average about 2.5 kilos of meat for that. So the margins are good. It allows us to plan a year in advance. So the entire group of Steak Club members get different cuts at different times. So it means that from a nose to tail point of view and a production point of view, we can send all the cuts from an animal at the same time, which has huge advantages. It also means that we can, as far as growth goes, you'll see on the bottom right-hand side there's a little bit of a graph. There's a red dot there, and it started very organically. We had 8 members, I think, in 2019, and since then it's sort of grown strength by strength. That little red dot coincided with an article that came out in the Rob Report, which is where you go to check out your new helicopter or super yacht, and from there, we had a huge spike in numbers of people joining the wait list and signing up to the Steak Club. Previous to that point, we haven't pushed out any formal advertising. So a lot of this growth is organic growth. Guys tapping each other on the shoulder and saying, you should be part of this. And it's getting to the point now that we're at the tipping point where we can move from, packing boxes at a third-party processor, which allows us to reach out to the other parts of the United States more efficiently. You can see there on that slide, in the top right-hand corner there, currently under the Steak Club, they get venison racks, and they are received very positively amongst most of the members. What that means for venison is it allows us to create a venison-centric box for the US Steak Club, which will be primarily venison with more of a barbecue focus. It'll be, as I said, tied in with the ability to provide very precise cooking instructions, so to help ensure that positive first-up experience. And it's a great gateway to be able to expose some of our new products. So within that Steak Club format, they also have access to a private e-commerce store where they can top up additional steaks for a barbecue or some venison racks for during the week. It's a great way to keep products moving, and a good way to allow us to try new products in the market with a very engaged and positive audience. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for having me.
You might recall a Wellington conference where we talked about a program we did with Arby's, and it refers to what was just being talked about, that we found with Arby's, they've got 3,000 restaurants, and we sort of canvassed around the industry for a bit of supply, and we came up with 71 steaks per restaurant for their program. They said, we want a month's supply. And we said, yeah, well, that's about 5 times 71 steaks per restaurant. And anyway, they went ahead and trialled it, and it just exceeded all expectation. They sold out in most restaurants within a day and a half of their 1 month program. So what we learned from that was just what's been spoken about, is that in America, they actually do like venison. So since then, we've been looking at options to find ways to extend on that, and I'm going to talk about that a bit shortly in my presentation. The first 2 speakers talked about the reduction in value, and to me, it's quite shocking that we had to discount our product $50 million to achieve the same sales in the last year. I know it's been brutal. COVID has stuffed up a big chunk of our business, but not all of it. And to a certain extent, trying to sell product to a market that's closed is a self-defeating exercise. So dropping our price when the restaurant's closed, what's that going to achieve? Venison's a niche protein. We all know that. How niche? Terry, I think, put out a figure of 70 million tonnes of meat consumed in the US. From New Zealand, we export 400,000+ tonnes of each of beef and sheep meat, and we export just over 11,000 tonnes of venison. So it's pretty much nothing. So the challenge ahead for us in the marketing side is to get that value back. These are the markets we're mainly focused on in Europe: Sweden, France, Switzerland, USA, of course, and China's the new and developing one. And I've spoken about China at previous conferences, and I'll talk briefly about that shortly. This is a type of message in Scandinavia that the people, our team over there, are putting out to the consumers, and I'll just read it. Are you one of those who wants to eat better and healthier food but can't say no to a juicy steak? Personally, I think it's more about eating less, and when you do, you should eat better quality. One of the products I have had the opportunity to work with is the venison at Mountain River from New Zealand. After visiting farmers in the South Island of New Zealand, and after seeing the red deer grazing in the pasture, I realised that this was the perfect alternative to beef. Farming venison has a low impact on nature, since most of the land where they are raised is not suitable for growing food crops because it has rolling or steep hills. Henning, of course, the problem the last year with the supermarkets is in Europe is you can't actually visit them. So salespeople are just not allowed to go to the supermarket. So our only method of communication is through the internet. He spoke to a big supermarket in Sweden and asked them to put one of our niche cuts in their weekend box. It's kind of a surprise weekend bag. And the supermarket reported that it was the most popular item they've ever had in one of their weekend bags, so they've had to do it again. I've spoken about our supply program with Picard. We've been supplying them about, I think this is the 17th year. They have 900 stores throughout France, and it's sold seasonally, so it's sold pretty much November, December, a little bit January. When I presented this to a conference in Timaru maybe 15 years ago, the concept was around that the Picard are a top-end retail in frozen products. And our issue, as it still is today, is the mismatch between production and the market. So most of our suppliers want to supply their deer between November and March, and the market wants us to produce it between September and November. So frozen gives us the opportunity at a premium to supply the market. Last year, their sales, they sold out, which was pretty cool. So this year they've increased their orders. In China, we're continuing with our man in the market there, Hunter McGregor, to investigate opportunities. Of course, last year was brutal. Most of his customers or his market, it actually closed down just at the time of Chinese New Year. So our peak sales month was devastated. But, you hang on and regroup. And he's now moving into supply. This particular restaurant, Melbourne, is run by an Australian, but doing some inviting people to come and try venison. But I think they have about 6 or 8 dishes on the menu, and mostly Chinese clientele. So his feedback, like with Hunter, the feedback from the restaurant is telling us what carts, types of products, and what might work, types of dishes, and so on. So it's all a learning experience. If you're interested, you can follow Hunter online. He does all the social media, but it's pretty interesting stuff that he's doing up there. Moving to the US market, we've worked with D'Artagnan for a number of years. I've presented that at conferences in the past. They continue to market the venison, but the key thing for us is the positioning, that it's top end of the food service market, and that's really important. That's where we can get the value. Retail, of course, in the last year, with food service being closed, particularly in New York, retail, it's up by 70%, and we do a range of products, chilled products that we send up there, and it is high-end positioning. They're not cheap products in the market, but a 70% increase in a tough time, we're pretty pleased with that. Force of nature. This is pretty interesting. This is the company we're going to work with for the P2P project. Force of Nature are a startup company that have got a particular message that's targeting a market that's interested in where the meat's coming from, how it's grown, and regenerative agriculture. They're not saying to us, this is what you have to do. We're saying to them, this is what we're doing. How can you market it? And what we've found in talking to our suppliers is that most of them are following most of the principles of regenerative agriculture. In the US, there's a statistic that 60% of the antibiotics that are used in the country are used in agriculture. Americans are shocked by that. at least a chunk of them are, and we don't need too many to be shocked to say, look, we need to eat better meat. We need to preserve the future. We need to think about that. The people behind Force of Nature set up EPIC, and that was an epic success for the venison industry as well, because this was talked about at a Wellington conference maybe 5 years ago, that EPIC were taking a lot of trim in the development of this product, their snack bars. They sold EPIC, made a lot of money, and want to invest it in their new project with regenerative agriculture. If you're interested in that, just go online, Force of Nature Meats. There's a huge amount of information, plenty of discussion. There's all the social media, and they're pretty active in that space. At the moment, we're doing 3 products with them, 2 ground products, an elk ground and a venison elk. Matt's explained a bit about the elk, and it's an important part of our business in North America. In fact, it's an important part of our business full stop. We've had a specialty elk program for maybe 15 years, and farmers who've supported that hopefully have been rewarded over time, and it's still going strong. Just a quick summary. In our opinion, the value can be reclaimed. Food service is going to rebound. I think retail will continue to be an important market. In many ways, it always has been. There's a bit more emphasis on it now, and more opportunity as people are cooking at home. Unfortunately, the disruption's not over yet. We've got shipping. It's just as bad in markets like the US. Getting product across the US is almost as challenging as getting it there. And we just don't know what the next disruption's going to be. We do have to engage the challenge from climate change and the Eat Less movement, but those are, for our industry, are not necessarily negatives. We've got so little meat to sell that all we need is for them, or to identify those consumers who are prepared to vote with their wallet. I think that's me done. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We don't need to tell you that venison was experiencing price volatility long before COVID came along. And we don't need to tell you that COVID came along and made things a hell of a lot worse for us. But what we as your processor and your exporter do need to tell you is that we're working hard to find solutions. And we do need to tell you that Silverfern Farms is 100% committed to the venison category as part of our business and see it as a long-term part of our product portfolio. We all know that venison is a very special protein and has a great story to tell, but is not without its challenges that we are seeing at this time. There is a saying that adversity is an opportunity in disguise. COVID has taught us that our industry must be more resilient and think and act and invest differently to get different results. We cannot rely upon one sector as we have in the past. European and US food services have been such a key sector for us, but we have seen what happens when something like COVID hits and that sector closes down. We cannot sit and wait and hope that the food service sector recovers, because hope is not a strategy. We've been doing a lot of thinking about our future and what it could look like, and it all starts with a simple question. What if we could build long-term resilience, profitability, and stability through innovation, diversification, and unmatched global market access? In fact, we don't think this is a question. We think this is an action. And today we're going to talk about what we have done, what we are doing, and what we are going to do in the future. Getting to this future state relies on making good decisions now. During COVID, we formed a red team whose role was to look at every possible scenario that could hit us and impact on our ability to process, our ability to ship product, and the ability of our customers to purchase our product. We modelled dozens of different scenarios and created plans to mitigate them. Not all those scenarios arose, but some did. And we're pleased with how we were able to pivot in many ways to keep processing through that lockdown period and beyond. Out of this team originated the Venison Recovery and Growth Project. We knew that we already had some challenging situation on venison, and we knew that COVID dragged on, that situation would get much more challenging as the critical food service remained closed. Our mission became to overturn every stone, every opportunity globally. We needed to answer some fundamental questions. How do we increase consumption? How do we get venison to people that want to eat venison? And how do we reduce our reliance on existing channels? We knew we needed to move the dial quickly and get product out the door to create solutions for the problems that we have immediate. And we look to turn to long-term solutions in the future for the problems that venison is still facing. So here in New Zealand, we launched a venison burger into retail as part of our 3-species range. It has been tremendously successful. This is on the back of our existing retail range, and we cannot underestimate how important having that base already established was. In the USA, we rolled out a Silver Fern Farms 1 pound venison brick into retail stores, which has since become #1 venison SKU by volume in US grocery and can be found in more than 600 stores. We are targeting to double the number of stores by the end of 2021, and this will become a massive alternative channel option for our manufacturing venison going forward. The success of this one product then gives us the license to discuss range extension with these retailers in the future and grow our venison presence on shelf. What we have learned in the US is that as consumers gain more kitchen confidence, developed through quarantine times, and as pushback continues against industrial agriculture in America, venison is in a positive position to have a larger role to play in people's lives. So that's where Project Roosevelt comes in. We name all our projects, and Project Roosevelt is a nod to President Roosevelt, who gifted deer to New Zealand in the early days of their introduction in our country. Project Roosevelt is working to redefine America's relationship with venison with clever marketing and innovation, empowered by e-commerce. We have created our own e-commerce platform in the US, as you can see in the bottom right, where consumers can visit to order Silver Fern Farms products, including a range of venison, and have them delivered anywhere in New Zealand. Anywhere in the USA. We've also spent the last 12 months researching and building a new proposition to turn venison into a lifestyle brand for outdoor enthusiasts, similar to what Matt touched on before, whose values of the land and animal stewardship and doing things just a little bit differently. The outdoor market segment spends over $900 billion per year on recreational pursuits, and we can target just a small portion of that spend, but it relies on us delivering a portfolio of products relevant to their outdoor lifestyles. Products such as meat snacks, jerky, are the types of items that we are currently discussing with third-party processors in the US. Part of encouraging these consumers to bring us into their lives is to tell the story of our product that resonates with them, including the story of our animals, the land, the place, and the passion of our farmers, with our farmers being the positive force behind the story. Developing our position in new segments and in new channels take time. These are slow burn projects. But watch the space, because we're going to be doing some interesting things in 2021 and beyond. However, we cannot treat US as the only developing market. Project Moonshot wants to educate 1 billion people in China, or at least a portion of them. And with the support of DINZ, we're able to focus additional resource on retail, food service, and pet food channels. Within the Silver Fern Farms Shanghai office, we have a resource dedicated to the venison business, as well as their own investment in China. Part of the funding that DINZ has provided is allowing our team to identify and break down barriers to consumption through chef and consumer engagement, building access to markets via e-commerce and strategic partnerships, and focusing on creating the perfect portfolio of products specifically geared for this market. We've been running chef workshops, demonstrations, trade shows, and on-the-ground research with real customers in market. In fact, today, our China team is representing venison at Seoul, Asia's largest food service expo, with over 100,000 attendees, and presenting new innovation, as seen in the bottom left of this slide, on our stand in this show. We know that China is one of the largest growing e-commerce nations in the world, with incredibly complex systems of getting into the market. But we're excited to be now promoting 3 venison products with a strategic e-commerce partner in Shanghai. By the end of 2021, we expect to see venison on menus and additional e-commerce channels in Shanghai, Beijing, and Guangzhou. As it turns out, China has a lot of pet owners, which represents another significant opportunity for us, which is also in development. As with the previous initiatives in the US, China is going to be a slow burn project. This is not going to happen overnight, but there's no disputing that this market has the potential to be a game changer for New Zealand venison. So what does the future look like? Well, we think it is about getting deeper into the market, closer to the consumers, and diversifying the channels that we operate in. Providing venison to the right consumer at the right time, with the right messaging and in the right format, which drives stronger whole carcass demand, resilience through market diversification, and growing profitability. To get there, it is going to take a combination of long-term and short-term investments that we have already committed to. We need to invest now during the toughest time because we cannot rely on our traditional markets and channels alone, or we will just get more of the same. By leveraging the incredible stories and values that you as farmers and stewards have, we will be able to connect our consumers globally with the shared values of a sustainable, healthier, better for you food option. With your commitment to raising some of the world's finest proteins and our commitment to our strategy, global access and market expertise, together we will build a more profitable, sustainable and resilient future for venison. Thank you.
So I have a series of questions here provided that to get things underway whilst you think of your wonderful questions here in the audience or online. I'm going to start initially with last up, first here, Peter Robinson, to answer this one. From your perspective, what is the outlook for venison over the next few months, at least?
Yeah, I think the most certain thing we have at the moment is uncertainty. As you've seen from all the presenters today, there's a lot of new initiatives going on in terms of what we're all trying to do differently in market, and that's going to have a big benefit for us. But it's going to take time. I think most exporters are probably starting to see some green shoots of interest coming. And I think the very near term, from now through to the chilled season, is looking okay. There is a little bit of interest in sales, but it's the long term future which is going to be the biggest question. We're heading into the important chilled season coming up in September, October. And as Nick presented, the numbers last year were looking really good, and I think everyone on the stage would probably say that it's looking positive for this year as well, and it looks like demand is going to be equally as good as what it was last year. The big issue for us is whether we can actually get the product to market. And that's the uncertainty and the unknown at the moment with these logistical issues. So as we all know, chilled is very perishable product, and any disruption to the supply chain delivery of product into market is going to put some pressure on that. So while we've got positive markets or positive demand for that chilled, we've all got to try understand whether we can actually get the product there, which of course puts a lot of challenges on where we can set schedules for that chilled season.
Terry, do you have some following comments?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Peter there. The logistical issues are actually quite serious, potentially serious, and we have to work our way around those. The game season itself looks promising. We're getting some interesting initial conversations with people about expectations around that. So, yes, if we can get it there and get it there in a timely fashion, it looks at least as good as it was last year, in our view. A key point going forward will be the frozen consumption of the existing stock in Europe during the game season. That will then set the sentiment going forward. So quite an important part of the jigsaw puzzle is understanding how that will go. And, we're looking forward to dropping those inventories in market to give us a better outlook going forward.
Andy?
Yeah, just happy to round that out a little bit. It might be stating the obvious, but these chilled markets are essential. I think that this industry holds on to them, but the real risk is, as Terry and Peter have said, the real risk is the shipping disruption and the delays because it erodes the shelf life. It may just be too risky to ship sea freight. A meat company that's not involved in venison recently had a container arrive in Europe after expiry date, and you can't insure against that stuff. So I think the important point is that rather than let those markets disappear, we need to find a way to get to them, and that's where air freight comes in. But the cost of air freight is a huge extra cost, which will erode the short-term returns. But it's better to do that than not supply at all.
I'll direct this one to John Sadler. It is about the relevance of Wapiti genetics in our venison production, considering all the high growth reds that are available today. What would you say to that?
Is that a question for a farmer? In terms of Wapiti, I can only comment on the marketing of the product, which I alluded to or talked about in my talk. There is demand for Wapiti as a species, but then we're not looking for 50 to 60 kilo deer. We're looking for 70 plus. And then we'd market it as a Wapiti product. In terms of using Wapiti genetics to produce heavier deer earlier, that's not really my expertise. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question that has been provided to me. Farmers are being asked to produce animals faster and heavier so they can be killed earlier. The trouble is that processors can't kill everything earlier, and if our animals then get over that 85 kilogram mark, they're penalised. This causes us to waste some growing potential for animals. So why are good young animals penalised for being over 85 kilograms? Who would like to take that question? Andy?
We were actually, 12 months ago, we were in a slightly better space with the over 85 young ones than we are now. So the answer to the question is in three parts, and the first part is COVID. When COVID shut down the world's restaurants, it effectively removed the main market for young heavies, which wasn't Europe. In other words, the main market was in markets outside of Europe, North America in particular. The issue with Europe is they don't like to buy any strip loins that are over 3 kilos, and 3 kilos happens to be the weight of a strip loin off an 85 kilo carcass. So the heavy young deer don't have a home in Europe, not a home that is at premium pricing. So we were actually, we were in better shape this time last year because we were nudging that 85 further up. And then COVID came along and sort of made us 5 steps backwards. But it'll come back again as North America in particular reopens. I think the gap between the under and over 85s will close up because we'll be able to access those markets that like those that can handle the heavier cuts again. So it's about cut size in Europe. It's about the effect that COVID has had. And the other one about it is, funnily enough, numbers. When you get a handful of any deer that are different, when you get a handful of fallow deer, when you get a handful of heavy deer, there's a certain nuisance value. They're not a nuisance, but there's no efficiency with processing or with market size or order quantity. Ironically, if you can get some decent numbers, then it gets a lot easier to find high-value markets. So if somebody says, what will you do with my 2 100-kilo stags? There are less answers than if they say, what will you do with my 50 100-kilo stags? So numbers is also part of the answer. So watch the space, watch out for schedules, because I think you'll see that discount for over 85s start to disappear as these markets recover. Thanks.
Okay, turning over to you with your questions. Grant.
I've got a question definitely directed towards John Sadler after just a comment earlier. And just you made the comment that selling venison into a market that's closed is not a good way to do business, and I'm sure everyone in the room can understand that. But without causing any more sort of disruptions to the supply chain and with the logistic problems and everything that we all know about, could you touch on how that could have maybe been handled any differently then? That with still maintaining product flow?
You already can't maintain product flow, can you, when the distribution channel's broken? Essentially, how could it be handled differently? I mean, we're a small player in the business, a niche marketing company, and we spoke with our suppliers and came up with a solution. It more revolved around holding more stock, and that allows us at the moment to at least be in a position of, I wouldn't say dictating, but when the market comes back, and we absolutely need that, we need the restaurants to reopen. When they reopen, we'll have stock available to supply them. And, as we move further down the value chain as a marketing company, it's always a challenge. We've got this mismatch of production and market, and it's in our interest to control as much as we can the production that we do, so that we're supplying directly as we can to restaurants, rather than relying on a commodity type situation. And it's not always possible for the industry, and I think it's a long-term development that it's in everybody's interest to market New Zealand venison as New Zealand venison. When I started in the industry, most of our venison was marketed as European venison. We all know that history. It helped us get started, but the future's in New Zealand venison being sold as New Zealand venison. Thank you.
Richard.
My question's a general question to the panel. I've been reading in the States that online shopping's gone from 1.7 billion to well over 10 billion. Do you think this is a trend that's happening in the States and that it will stay? And are we moving fast enough as an industry to engage with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. The online shopping, it's sort of divided into three categories. You've got the online supermarket retail stuff, so replacing physically going to a supermarket. I think as it opens up, naturally that'll come back a wee bit, but it has also opened up a lot of people's eyes into how convenient that is. The second part are your My Food Bag equivalent, so your subscription service, and some of the social listening results that we saw through the DINZ project indicated that there was a lot of, I'm going to try this one this week because they're going to give me 3 free meals, and I'm going to try this one next week because I'm going to get 3 more free meals. So they're, sitting at home, they're bored, they're trying a whole bunch of different food bag options. I'd say that'll drop off a little bit more. And then I guess the other category is similar to what we spoke about. We are trying to create a direct line to ours as a club rather than a subscription. So that state club allows us direct access to those people when they are paying up front for a whole year. That's a slightly different side of things. And I think everybody here is putting time, us included, into e-commerce platforms, particularly in the US, and not so much us, but everybody else in China, to allow us to get that direct access to customers and have a little bit more of a robust supply chain in case we get something else happen in the near future. Some parallel parks are shipping across the Suez Canal again. Any of those kind of things can affect us, and COVID's taught us that. So the more of that online direct customer, the better.
Graham.
Yep. That's very interesting and very encouraging to hear the green shoots coming along, albeit that we have the logistic problem with the shipping, which is of a great concern. My question is based not for this season, it's for next season. It seems in the industry at the present moment, two things happening on the actual farm side, in that with the new rules and regulations coming on of waterways and fencing off waterways and wetlands and things like that, I know personally of 2 or 3 farmers, and I've heard of quite a few other substantial farmers that are not going to go ahead and put the fences up, are getting rid of their deer and putting sheep there. Cost implications of that fencing is too high. So they've left the industry. There are quite a lot of people in the 200 and 300 hind bracket also that are just struggling and finding it very difficult to satisfy the bank manager at today's rates. I'm not blaming anybody, that's reality. And they're leaving. And if you talk to the agents, you'll find there's a huge amount of hinds being killed, and you'll see them coming through yourselves, no doubt. My question is, next year, we could well be faced, or you could well be faced with a shortage of supply. Have you considered that?
Yeah, all I can say is yes, absolutely. I mean, is this working?
Yes.
It's an issue around, we're trying at the moment to recover from an extremely difficult situation, but we have to keep our eye on what's the long-term business, and our price positioning, as I spoke about, is absolutely critical. We have to invest in markets where the value is there for the future. We hope the restaurants sell out this year because they can buy a lot of cheap product, but in the future, that's not going to be the situation.
Okay, I'm going to have to round it out now to one more. Apologies. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to add sorry, where was I now? We were talking about, of course, the potential shortage. Sorry, Graham. Yeah. Look, we've seen it in lamb. Now, this is a very interesting development because we've got a strong retail platform now with our products, lamb and beef, and venison is coming on. And then you're going to have the food service channel opening, which will again be 2 competing and very strong options. What we have to manage is the price expectations. As I mentioned in my earlier speech, and we don't want to go on that boom and bust cycle. So good question, has to be managed absolutely carefully that we don't blow this thing apart again. But yeah, there's a potential shortage and we'll have to just ration to the best revenue performing options available.
Last question to Mark.
We've heard the supply chain disruptions that COVID have caused in shipping, and that there was very little that you could do with markets being closed. And as such, do you feel that the prices that venison has been dropped to have perhaps been lower than they needed to be to keep the product flowing?
No, I don't think so. I think we're in a position now where in the early stages of COVID, there was a heck of a lot of uncertainty, and when sales tipped over, we had no markets. So the schedules were a wee bit speculative, but we're now in a position now where I think that schedules reflect market returns, albeit at a very low level. And as those opportunities come about and the opportunity to increase prices, we'll start to see schedules reflecting those gains. That's where we would see it.
Yeah, I'd go a little further. during the worst of the COVID lockdown, the market returns actually were probably below where the schedule stayed. To put it another way, if you wanted a completely market-related schedule, it didn't go low enough. But it is where it is, and rather than dwell on that, more importantly, as these other markets, particularly the non-European markets, recover, then we will see the results in the farm gate returns.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and your presentations. A huge round of applause, please, for the efforts there.